Hi, everyone. I wish I could be here in person, but I'm working a poll today for Elections Ontario. I'm Cindy Long. I'm a retired Ontario educator. I attended this amazing conference myself many years ago, and I'm glad that you're all here today. Anita has given you an introduction as to how proportional representation could work to make every vote matter. And I think also to the work that Fair Vote Canada has been doing. I'm going to apologize in advance for looking down at my notes because I did this on short notice and I didn't have time to memorize my presentation. Electoral reform is really at the core of every other issue we face as a society. When we stop to consider everything from climate change and affordable housing to the underfunding of public services such as education and healthcare, we can acknowledge that good governance and thoughtful legislation lie behind any meaningful changes. Laws that make it harder to privatize education and healthcare, laws that protect our national institutions like the CBC or our provincial ones like the Ontario Arts Council, laws that make it difficult for corporations to operate in ways that increase greenhouse gas emissions, and laws that make it easier for workers to unionize and receive fair wages and benefits. Those laws are made by the ones we elect to govern us. So our voting system is crucial to electing governments that are less focused on partisan hostilities and that instead are required to cooperate and collaborate on sound legislation that benefits our society. So how can we create classroom cultures that empower students to see themselves as citizens who have a voice, who grow up believing that they have influence and agency, and who leave our schools fully expecting that their democratic institutions will be fair ones? Fair Vote Canada, in collaboration with some Ontario teachers and with the support of ETFO, has developed specific lesson plans for grade 10 civics. And right now we're piloting a set of lessons for grade 5 social studies, strand B, people and environments, the role of government, and responsible citizenship. Anita has a handout for you at the end of the session that will have the information on either how to obtain those lesson plans or how to get involved in piloting them for us, depends on where we're at. But no matter what grade we teach, there are ways that we can, in our classrooms, plant the seeds for participatory democracy and active citizenship. I'm going to outline 5 things that we can do, regardless of grade level, to heighten our students' level of awareness of their status in a democratic society. Before I do that, though, I want to note that unless things have changed dramatically since I retired a few years ago, most elementary teachers often teach their own language arts strands, and we have those 4 strands: reading, writing, oral communication, and media literacy. These are ideal for exploring our voting system. Even very young children can grasp the basic concepts of fairness. Let's say you have 4 different types of fruit you bring in for kids to choose from at kindergarten snack time, and you take a vote to decide what kind of fruit everyone would prefer. And let's say 7 kids choose bananas, and the 14 remaining kids choose, they vote between the 3 remaining fruits. So then you look at the results and you tell them, well, most of you chose banana, so everyone has to have banana. You don't even have to tell them that this is about our voting system. You're just planting a seed for later thinking. Of course, they're going to see that that's really unfair, and you can play along with that and say, what, isn't that fair? And when they yell, no, you're going to agree with them and give them whatever kind of fruit they want. But that exercise does plant a seed about how a vote like that doesn't really fairly represent us. In grades 7 and 8, I used language arts as a means to explore our voting system directly. We read about different voting systems, we spoke about them, we debated them, we examined media articles about them, considering sources and possible biases. And they wrote either reports or opinion pieces to express what they thought or what they discovered. Fairness is very important to young adolescents. And by grades 7 and 8, if students think something is unfair, they will not hesitate to let you know. So language arts becomes a very easy avenue for direct learning about voting systems. A simple hook is showing the class the results from any recent federal or provincial election and getting them to compare the percentage of votes to the percentage of seats won in parliament or in the legislature. You can do this with a municipal election or a band council election too. In most cases, the winner of the mayoral race or the elected chief did not have the majority of the votes that were cast. They see the unfairness instantly. You even get to work a little math into that. I think it's important to note, it's not you telling students that the system is unfair. You're not leading your students down some particular political path or teaching your opinions. The statistics speak for themselves. It's an examination of one of our most critical democratic institutions. You're looking at the numbers and you're asking, what does this suggest? Always keeping in mind that all curriculum is inherently political. A conscious decision not to examine our institutions with a critical eye is equally a political decision. And as I recall, there are some specific expectations in the history and the human geography curricula that lend themselves really well to the exploration of how we govern ourselves. So I mentioned 5 things that we can do in the classroom, and I'm going to outline those. Hopefully all the technology works as planned and you can see the visuals, my screen shares as we go along. The first thing you can do from day one is to involve your students in decision-making in the classroom. People unaccustomed to being involved in decisions make for passive citizens. So I'm just going to see, I hope you can see my screen here. One excellent exercise that I learned from an exemplary colleague was the ideal classroom exercise. And you do this in the first few days of school. The class brainstorms what their ideal classroom environment would be. They make a list, and you as the teacher make one too. And this list can be everything from the physical space, the furniture, the layout, what they'd like to learn, how they'd like to learn it, how they'd like people to treat one another, and what rules they wish were in place. The sky's the limit, and it doesn't matter that some of the things on the wish list will be impossible. Some of the things on your wish list are probably impossible as well. But you just share all the ideas and you accept every idea at first. And eventually, maybe the next day, you agree on what's not actually possible and you look at what the commonalities are amongst everybody's list, because there are always commonalities. And out of those commonalities, you work together to come up with a set of class agreements. That's what we called them in our class anyway, a set of norms or expectations for the year. And we made a poster and we put those agreements in a highly visible place in our classroom. This class, the example I used, they really valued a sense of humor. We had a separate note about not using hurtful humor in the classroom, but they felt that a sense of humor was a really important value to maintain throughout the year. So right from the start, your students will see that you care about what they think. I also learned a lot about my class each year from doing this exercise. Feeling as if we have input into the rules makes the rules easier to tolerate. Believing that we have a right to have input into the rules is a core belief of citizens in a democracy. Holding periodic classroom meetings is another way to involve students in decision-making and resolve any issues that might arise. The book Class Meetings by Donna Stiles is available on the Ontario College of Teachers Margaret Wilson Library for free, and I highly recommend it. So that's the first thing you can do, is involve students in decision-making. The second thing is to avoid using first past the post. Anytime there's a decision or an outcome with more than 2 possible results, You want to not use first past the post, whether that's deciding what type of music to play at the school dance, holding student council elections, agreeing on a rotation of gym games to play, choosing amongst several plays for a dramatic performance, coming up with the preferred method of presenting some research, or deciding on the questions you'll ask during a statistical survey in math. Whatever it is, model proportional representation as a decision-making method. Some situations, alternative vote might be more appropriate. We wouldn't want to see that for our federal or provincial elections, but and for reasons that I'm sure Anita has outlined for you, but just as much as possible, avoid first past the post. The third thing is to consistently engage students in meaningful dialogue and analysis of the important things. I'm trying to screen share here, but I'm not sure it worked perfectly. So I'm just going to try to do it again. There we go. I'm still not sure that worked very well. I think it did that time. So the third thing then is to try to engage students in meaningful dialogue and analysis of important and even controversial issues. There's no reason not to do this, and plenty of reasons to do it. And as Kello said, when we dismiss opportunities to discuss the nuances of issues in our classrooms, we deprive students of the chance, indeed the responsibility, to examine current and historically embedded narratives, especially those that sustain social inequality and arrive at informed opinions about what they're seeing and hearing in the world around them. You are justified in doing this by the expectations in the Ontario curriculum. And if you're concerned about possible negative feedback from parents or administration, just ensure that you know which curriculum expectations you are addressing and which learning skills you're addressing. No one can argue that you shouldn't be discussing, for instance, the prevalence of poverty among Indigenous people worldwide, when you can say, well, it says here in the grade 6 curriculum that, students should be analyzing the responses of Canadian governments, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and individual citizens to an economic, environmental, political, and/or social issue of international significance. And it says in Growing Success that we want our schools to be safe and to be models of effective human relationships where students learn about and put into practice attributes such as respect, responsibility, fairness, and empathy. Engaging with the important issues sets the stage for students to engage politically once they graduate from high school. And the fourth idea is one that I already mentioned previously, and that is to establish classroom norms that exemplify respectful dialogue and that model and actively teach emotional self-regulation. There is a great book, another one. This one's also available in the OCT library. It's called Students Taking Action Together, and it focuses on social and emotional learning. We're hearing a lot more about mental health and well-being, and students learn best when they feel safe and valued and connected. We know this. So by focusing on the social emotional learning, everything else you do will have more impact. And finally, we can choose materials and methods that encourage consideration of systemic inequalities. As Fulmer has pointed out, the more engaged students are in classroom discussions of oppression, justice, power, and equity, the greater the potential to raise student consciousness of how these constructs limit the rights, freedoms, opportunities, and access of others in society. So what can we do to engage students in these issues? Well, we can choose materials and methods that encourage consideration of systemic inequalities by using texts and talks such as TED Talks across the curriculum that lend themselves to discussion of systemic inequalities. We can present problems in math class that involve consideration of a societal issue, whether that's exploring accessibility issues using geometry and measurement, using graphs and charts that show income or incarceration disparities by race, examining food insecurity through budgeting or financial literacy exercises, looking at what percentage of people live below the poverty line, or finding out what fraction of the class has family members whose first language is not English. In other subject areas, we can involve students in a fair voting system when choosing sports or games themes in phys ed class. We can explore art and music from a wide variety of cultures and genres and encourage yes, no, maybe exercises, which is a technique outlined in the stat book, this one. For example, is Banksy's work vandalism? Yes, no, maybe. Would a particular piece of music work well as the background for a dramatic scene? And we can draw on the existing expectations in social studies and history and geography to engage students in meaningful dialogue. While some of these things do not connect directly to our voting system, they all prepare students to engage actively in issues that matter, to view societal issues through a social justice lens, and to feel as though their thoughts and opinions matter. It helps them to learn that opinions are best formed after reviewing facts and that opinions can change in the face of new evidence. It allows you the opportunities to teach them how to express their thoughts and opinions respectfully and in ways that tend to persuade rather than alienate others. With the exception of the grade 5 social studies and grade 10 civics curricula that focus very specifically on government and our responsibilities as citizens, we don't have very many opportunities to directly discuss our voting systems as a standalone topic. But I hope the strategies and ideas that I've shared today illustrate how we can engage students at any grade level in learning activities that nurture their instincts for fairness and guide them in developing a sense of themselves as active and effective citizens. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you today. Now back to Anita.